What's up, YouTube? It's your boy AP, and today we're showcasing my all Pinnacle content viable endgame Skeletal Storm Mage setup. This video is going to go over my current gearing as well as passive tree choices for the higher end. And don't worry, because Skeletal Storm Mages are very good on a budget as well. And the main video for this build will be found in the pinned comment, which is the default guide. Now, for this video, I am going to be showing B-roll for all of the Pinnacle content. And if you're thinking about playing minions, you can form your own decision on how this looks based on that B-roll. And for everybody else who's already following the build, I might as well give some pointers on these fights to give you guys the best chances while we watch the B-roll. All right, so we already watched the Arbiter fight. Most of the mechanics there are one-shots, so my advice would be to get as much movement speed as possible, preferably 35 movement speed boots. I also recommend doing it below tier 4. We actually watched at T3 difficulty. We clearly have the damage to do it with T4. However, with T4, the game's really unforgiving on the portals, and if you do mess up a mechanic, you're just out of the keys. So practice it a bunch on level 3 until you feel confident that you're never going to fail, and then you can bump it up to T4. Realistically, the minions are doing all the work for you. You don't have to change any of the skill gem setups for this boss. Just make sure you're walking in the safe zones depending on the different skill that the boss ends up using. Next up is Simulacrum, which is by far the hardest Pinnacle boss fight. And we're watching myself run the version that's going to drop the last 2 skill points to fully flesh out the Atlas passive tree. I should note that patch 0.2.0G is dropping in a few days, and this is going to make this fight easier. So what we're watching is pre-nerf content. And I do actually have 2 different tips to make it easier for us. The first one is going to be to alter our Skeletal Storm Mage setup a little bit. Now, if you're following the initial guide, you will remember there's a budget as well as a high budget setup for the Skeletal Storm Mages. The main difference being the budget one uses lightning penetration and a singular Skeletal Storm Mage, and the high budget has a secondary Skeletal Storm Mage. You only have one of them, and it's going to be applying shocks and exposure, which means we can take off Lightning Pen in order to put on a higher damage support such as LE Focus. Now, the problem with Simulacrum is there is a wave mod that reads plus 50 to monster elemental resistances, and this is going to make it way too difficult for the support Skeletal Storm Mage to inflict either exposure or shocks. So we're just going to go back to the budget setup that uses lightning penetration, and we're going to make sure we add Hex Bloom onto our conductivity. Now, cursing with conductivity as well as using lightning pen is going to be enough to lower monster resistances down to 0. And at this point, we're going to have way more effective damage in the Simulacrum fight than if we had the alternate setup for high budget. Even though on paper, technically the other one is going to have higher damage, just realistically, all the conditionals are not going to be met for that Simulacrum wave. The second tip is going to be conditional on whether your Storm Mages are consistently alive or not. If you do have enough investment, you will be able to just blow up everything instantly, and that's the best case scenario. But if you are noticing on some of the waves, your Storm Mages are just dead all the time, what you should be doing is taking off a few of them. And this is going to let you drastically increase the amount of Skeletal Clerics we have, because those cost a lot less than Storm Mages to begin with. So even though we're losing a small part of our damage by taking off 1 or 2 Storm Mages, we are gaining a lot of actual damage because their uptime is going to be 100% rather than almost 0% if they're getting killed. I actually have a third tip for Simulacrum, but this one applies to all boss fights. And that would be before you open the next wave of Simulacrum, or before you start a boss's intro animation, you should slam down Sigil Power and then repeatedly cast Conductivity inside of it, because Conductivity is a high mana cost, and this will help us buff Sigil Power up to stage 3 or possibly even stage 4. In every stage, you gain 14% more spell damage for anything in the AoE. The way we structure Sigil Power, we give it roughly 37 seconds of duration and a really big AoE, so our skeletons should be standing in it for the duration of most boss fights. I do caution you on trying to refresh this if for some reason the boss fight lasts longer than 37 seconds, because when you weapon swap to drop it down again, it temporarily unsummons your minions, and sometimes they don't come back immediately if you're doing it mid-fight. But this is going to be a ton of damage, and if you just have the stage 4 preloaded before you open the Simulacrum, it's going to help you just insta-clear the mobs for at least the first 3/4 of the fight. As for the King of the Mist fight itself, it's pretty easy. At certain points, you're either going to have a red or a purple ring around your character. The red ring means if you move around too much, you're going to be locked into this bone cage, and you're going to be at the mercy of tanking some abilities. And it's vice versa with the purple ring. The purple ring means you need to keep moving around until that ring disappears, or else you will be imprisoned. And once you get through the halfway point, you get teleported, and you got to follow the wisp into the next area. Now, there's nothing much to say for Breach either. In my opinion, both King of the Mist and Xesht, they're free fights. Something I do want to touch on is despite all the B-roll content being myself fighting the Pinnacle boss content, this build is really meant for mapping, and 99% of the time, we're blasting mass with this. It's a comfortable 0-button playstyle, and the arc really does a great job of clearing. Even in the difficult maps where we kind of have to go around corners, such as Augury, at least the arc is going to chain around the corner, and it chains so much, it feels pretty nice compared to the other minion options. Quick look at my character stats. We are res capped. Chaos res capping is quite important because chaos damage does twice as much to energy shield as it does towards life. I'm sitting at just over 10,000 energy shield, 455 spirit. And as for my Storm Mage tooltip, we're just under 35,000 on the arc when I have the Pain Offering pressed. Without Pain Offering buff, I'll bind that. It's 22,000. And the minion info, they're just under 10,000 life. And they're pretty high resistances. All right, let's take a look at my character's gearing and the decisions we made behind it. I should note that this is a deep dive into my specific character, and if you want the generic build guide, there is a video in the pinned comment and a written guide over on Mobalytics. This should be in the video description. All right, we're going to start things off with the Scepter. Now, for the Scepter, the most important mods are +4 to level of all minion skills, followed by allies in your presence deal increased damage, followed by as much increased spirit as we can get. As for suffixes, there are quite a few different good ones that we'll touch on. I crafted mine myself. So if you're crafting one, you're going to want to go for either an Omen base, a Rattling base, or a Stoic base. They all offer different upsides. And you're almost certainly going to want to Fracture +4 to level of all minion skills. This is a suffix. And at this point, we're just going to chaos spam until we get the prefixes we need. And we are pretty picky in getting these 3 prefixes. As we can see on Craft of Exile, for prefixes, we can get percent increased spirit up to 65%. We can get hybrid spirit with mana. That one goes up to 38%. And everything else is kind of a dead mod, except for the allies in your presence deal increased damage, which is very important. So this might take a while to hit. But once we hit this, the Scepter is pretty much done because we can actually guarantee to eventually get good suffixes by using omens. And yeah, this is around 5 divine, so I guess it's not going to be cheap to craft it, but what this does is you are going to annul only suffix modifiers. And when we combine that with omen of greater annulment, so your annul annuls 2, this is always going to clear off the suffixes. And there's actually a decent shot of getting useful suffixes. For suffixes, presence area of effect is nice. Intelligence is nice. We're always going to have the minion skills because it's locked in. It's impossible to annul that. Cast speed is nice. Critical hit chance is nice. Crit damage is nice. And monsters have percentage. Increased maximum life is also nice. I would say this is decent as well. And everything else is bad. Actually, honestly, strength is fine too. We do need some amount of strength. So as you can see, getting suffixes once you reach this stage isn't too hard. I actually got pretty unlucky. My suffixes are reduced attribute requirements and maximum life. This could definitely be made a lot better. But yeah, I don't know. I've tried like 5 or 6 times. I couldn't get anything better. Mathematically speaking, though, the odds of hitting these two things is roughly around 25% chance. So if you do it 4 times, you should hit this. In fact, I think if this is being like very, like all of these are pretty good. I think when I was doing the math, I was being a lot more picky. So this is actually, I don't know, this is probably pretty easy to hit. Anyways, that is the weapon. Realistically speaking, you should probably just trade search +4 minions with a decent amount of spirit with the increased damage mod and just see what you can get. See what the suffixes look like. It might be cheaper than crafting your own. I'm using Primate Talisman to get 30% increased damage. There is another talisman that gives you spirit, and I think it's worse because it's only to the spirit on the scepter. It's not global spirit, so it only gives you 10 spirit. I would much rather have 30% increased damage than 10 spirit. Okay, so that's the scepter out of the way. For the body armor, I was just looking for specifically Sacramental Robe because this gives you faster start of energy shield recharge, which feels really nice. This is just built into Sacramental Robe. Other than that, high energy shield. For the prefixes, really, you want flat energy shield, percentage energy shield, and then spirit. That's sort of not up for debate. And then you can try and get the suffixes to be as nice as possible. If you have a pretty good body armor and the suffixes aren't the best, you could always try doing... Do I have a Whittling right now? I don't. But if you turn on a Whittling orb, you can just hover a Chaos orb and see if it's going to change a suffix. And actually, I took off a pretty bad suffix and added reduced poison duration, which coincidentally is also completely useless because we don't get poisoned because our life can't change. But it could have hit something good. We just got unlucky. So yeah, that's what you want to look for on this. I wasn't always using a Sacramental Robe, but once we started min-maxing, I really wanted to fit in that faster start of energy shield recharge. For the helmet, just look for high energy shield and +2 minions. I've been corrupting helmets trying to get a corrupted implicit. You could either opt for the spirit implicit or the, I guess they're not called implicits, but like a spirit enchant or a +1 to all minions enchant. So again, here we did not hit that, but it's still a pretty good helmet. And if I wanted to push this further, I'd just try and get a corruption on it. For the shield, you want to get a Sun Splinter with +3 to level of all lightning skills. Now, the way skeletal storm mages work, these are not a spell, but they do have the lightning tag. So level to all spells does not work. Level to lightning spells does not work, but this specifically has level to lightning skills. That's the wording which makes this so powerful for our build. And you can actually corrupt this to get +4 to level of all lightning skills, although that's just incredibly hard to do. So I'm using a +3. If I wanted to push this further, I'd be using a +4. For the amulet, I went for a solar amulet base because that gives you 15 to spirit. And I tried fracturing +3 over and over again until we got that fracture. And then it's just a matter of slamming chaos orbs until it looks good, possibly using a whittling orb to make it better. So I opted for a decent amount of spirit, and I also locked in and getting the 50% increased maximum energy shield, which is a lot. I think for the amulet, this is actually worth going to Craft of Exile and just talking about it because there's so many different options that would be useful, and you shouldn't be trying to replicate my amulet. You should just be trying to make a good one. Okay, so for the suffixes, obviously the +3 minions is unnegotiable. And for the prefixes, having decent spirit is also unnegotiable. Other than that, we're pretty flexible. So we could get the energy shield. That's really nice. And honestly, there's really not too many other prefixes that are that good. I guess you could get flat energy shield. That would probably be best in slot. Rarity is not bad. But really, we're just caring about the spirit here. As for the suffixes, mana regen would be fine. Rarity would be fine. This build needs a lot of attributes, so if you could get the either all attributes, dex, or int, these would all be really nice. In fact, how much strength do I have right now? I have a decent amount of strength. Honestly, any attribute is going to feel so good. So all those attributes, top tier, chaos res. The build's weakness is chaos damage, since chaos damage inherently does double damage onto energy shield. So we do want to be trying to max out the chaos res. I'm at 74%. This feels pretty unkillable at that amount. And you're going to have to find that on your pieces of gear. So there you go. Any of the resistances, honestly, would be fine. So that's what we're looking for on the amulet. As for the other three pieces, it's just sort of filling in the stats. So obviously I want to have as much energy shield as possible, but I was mostly looking to get some intelligence just because I needed it to put on my gear. To have the skill gem requires, I think, 205 intelligence. Intelligence and chaos res and some resistances, as much energy shield as possible. Same with the gloves. The belt is giving me even more chaos res. Technically speaking, we could use the ingenuity to buff our Venturous Gambles. But the problem is I really want to be chaos res capped, and I just can't do it without the belt. So we're getting the belt here. As for Venturous Gamble, this is a way to get some spirit, a bunch of resistances, and rarity. I wouldn't say these are mandatory, but it is quite nice, right? We're blasting maps. We want to have a decent amount of rarity. Mine could be higher. And when we're getting intelligence and chaos res everywhere, you know, just fixing the rest of my res on the rings, it's pretty easy. On our passive tree, we have a bunch of jewels as well as an amulet anointment for quick response. Quick response gives us 50% faster start of energy shield recharge because we are never at full life. So the way you do that to get your life slightly below full is you can just go into some zone and put this helmet on. And the helmet takes away all your energy shields. So now if you take a hit, you'll take a little bit of damage. And if you do it in the story, you're not going to take very much damage. And now we just have this really crazy double dipping node from quick response. As for the jewels, obviously you put your best jewel in the Ascendancy jewel socket. Ideally it should be corrupted, although I feel like maybe I should divine this further before I corrupt it. Also, I don't want to risk bricking it. I like to get increased maximum energy shield on all of my jewels. That is part of the reason why I'm over 10,000 energy shield. Increased energy shield recharge rate is going to feel really nice. Cast speed for minions, crit damage for minions, increased damage for minions. There's a bunch of different options we can get. And this one's looking very similar to the last one. This one has faster start of energy shield recharge rather than energy shield recharge rate. Yeah, this one, again, they're all basically the same jewel. And to go over the actual Atlas tree, a little bit easier to see it in, or sorry, not Atlas tree, character tree. So we do have these weapon swap nodes, which are very important to do. The pink ones are for our weapon swap 1, and these nodes are going to be stuff that buff our minions, because most of the time our minions are out and we want that. But then occasionally we're going to swap to the staff to drop Sigil of Power, and that's going to temporarily take our minions away. And now we don't need those minion nodes, so we can grab stuff that buffs Sigil of Power, such as increased duration for Sigil of Power, as well as increased area of effect. And then as soon as you swap back to the minions, all these green nodes for Whip Swap 2 are still snapshotted onto the sigil, and they will stay. For my current skill gems, Malice with Clarity. The Clarity is optional just because I had the Spirit and it wasn't enough to use a different minion. Also, mana regen is quite nice. We don't use Parry. Sigil of Power, Mag Effect, as well as Persistence. Skeletal Storm Mage is supported by Feeding Frenzy, Arcane Tempo, Muster, Pinion Mastery, and LE Focus. Skeletal Cleric has Ingenuity, Sacrificial Lamb, Last Gasp. Convalescence, I talk about how to set this up. It's currently bugged and you can have it on your second weapon swap and it'll still work on your main one. I don't know how long that's going to last, but we could always just like take off a Storm Mage and spec that if we wanted to. Pain Offering, Meat Shield, Ablation, Conductivity, Focus Curse, Heightened Curse, Inspiration, Hex Bloom. We have the Terracotta Soldier, which is applying Blind, Maim, and Culling Strike. And this guy's mostly here, honestly, for the muster support to add a little bit of damage to our Storm Mages. I have Blink again in the weapon swap. We have our support Skeletal Storm Mage, which has Conduction, Lightning Exposure, Strip Away, Lightning Mastery, and Voltaic Mark. You can press this on a boss if you want. That's the only situation you'd ever press this. So most of the time you're running through maps, and if you want your guys to attack a little bit faster, I just left click Pain Offering. It's going to kill the cleric every time, and they're going to be shooting really, really fast. Realistically, I would only ever Sigil Power for a boss. And I mean, since Conductivity is on Hex Bloom, you can technically cast it in a dense map, and it's going to spread the curse throughout all the monsters, but I realistically don't really bother with that. Voltaic Mark, pressed once per map if there's a boss. Even then, this is completely optional. You could replace this with a different minion. For example, you could have one Frost Mage to buff your muster even more, and that would be perfectly fine. And if you are interested in the Frost Mage setup, I do have an example of that in the Mobalytics guide if you just wanted to have a singular Frost Mage. And that would actually give you a different button. You just have Frost Bomb instead of Voltaic Mark, and that would be perfectly fine. All right, I'll wrap this up by plugging my socials. I will be live on Twitch when this video goes up. Also, if you want some build help, there's 5,000 people in my Discord, and there's a section specifically for this build. Follow the channel, or Chris Wilson will steal your Divine Orbs.